Hello and welcome. In this video I'll be demonstrating our new Component Catalogues feature. This is quite a special video really because this feature is actually going to usher in a whole new level of functionality for BIM content, and it will improve and enable a lot of important processes. Let's have a look at how it works. This is the Infinite Openings tool, and in this tool we have the feature Component Catalogues and Assemblies. It enables you to define custom component configurations which you can then store in external and open format data. I'll just show you briefly how the concept works, and then we'll get into some of the details and I'll show you exactly how to use every function of it. So firstly, we can store predefined configurations. That's the basis of it. So this is just a basic sliding window. Let's just say for argument's sake that on this project I have one sliding type window and one awning type window, and I just want to store these configurations so that I can use them throughout the project. Firstly, what I need to do to this is I need to create this as an assembly. So an assembly is going to be a combination of features. It's a combination of the size, the panel arrangement, and the operable element. So what I want to do is I want to start storing this configuration. So first of all, I'm going to go into the overall shape. Now, there are a couple places to store this. We can store it internally and we can store it in an external database. To actually get it to internal, we first need to put it in the database. Then we can bring that database into an internal object. So let's go to the database. Okay, so this configuration is going to be, we'll just call it sliding 01. First thing we need to do is we need to make sure the communication is set. So we're going to our model view options, go down to Edomorph and turn on Infinite Openings communication. Click OK, back into the settings. Now we can store this element. We hit store. This is the drop down menu of all the stored elements. You can see it's not there yet. We just need a quick refresh. So we go back and forth on the pages, that refreshes it, and now we have that element here. The next thing we want to do is we want to store the panel arrangement. So the panel arrangement refers to the fact that there are no divisions in this element through mullions and transoms. So we do the same. We select our database. Just a note, you can actually nominate your own database. You can create several databases and store things in different ways. This is the default database. Once again, I just want to call this sliding 01. Store. So the next thing I want to do is I want to store the openings. So I'm just going to expand this so we can see it all. So this is a sliding type of opening, and we've got the window sash and the head track. We can set the sizes and stuff for this as well. So that's what I'm going to do. And I'm just going to name it all the same so it's consistent for this and easy to follow. We're not going to have a head track, obviously, for this element, but we definitely need to define the sash, because we have a certain size and we want that to conform to certain materials. So I put sliding in there and hit store. Just hit that again just to make sure that happened. You can just go and click on them just to make sure they actually did send through. Sometimes when the interface updates, you actually miss your clicking of the store button. Okay, so if I just turn that back to undefined, I can just store that again and make sure that went through. Okay, so I'm almost there. I now just want to store this complete opening arrangement here. So I'm just going to do the same thing there. Set my default database, change the name to sliding 01. Now before I define this assembly, I need to make sure everything is lined down here. So this sliding, I need to set this up. Okay, so that's stored. This opening, we store that. Set that to sliding, and then we hit store there. Okay, so now if you see, if I go to undefined, but then I come up here and I define that, it reverts this back to the setting. Now I need to assign all my sliding 01 components, and then I can store this assembly, store. Now when I assign that assembly, it locks off all those elements that I've defined. Okay, so let's say we undo this, set these all back to undefined, and now we want to create our awning window, and it's going to be a completely different size. So let's go into the overall shape. We'll just change this size here, make it an 800. Then we go into our operable elements and we change this to an awning. Now we go back to components and we want to go through that same process again. It's usually easier to start from the bottom and work your way up. So let's do that. So this is going to be awning 01. Store that component. I'll just copy this so I can paste it. Now if we assign this component, awning 01, we can now store this opening, store. We can now store this panel arrangement, which is actually the same as the sliding 01 because there's no mullions and transoms. Store, we'll store our overall shape, store. Then we'll apply all these and we'll store our assembly. Store. Just a quick refresh. That just needed an update too. You can see that's gone back to the sliding window. Our awning window should be there now. Awning just needs a quick refresh. And there's our awning window. So we now have these two components, two assemblies stored, ready to use all over the project. I'm just going to place each of them, maybe even a couple times. And then we'll extend this wall so that we can place a few more windows. I'll just do a couple of these and I'll make these into the sliders. It's very easy. Select them, go in, choose our sliding component. We don't really need to refresh here because we're just going straight to the 3D window. Okay, and there's our two sliders. Okay, now I'm going to go another level deeper. I'm going to set up a couple frame profiles. So the first thing I want to do is I want to come into this window. I want to go to my frame profile, hit define. You can see it's just a regular shape here. So I'm going to change that to the polygon. This is quite a narrow window. It's set to be an aluminium window, so it's quite thin. But I want to get the frame profile right and I want to have that sash sitting in the frame correctly. So I'm going to change it to a polygon and I'm going to make a little U-shaped channel. So now we just click OK. Actually, before we do that, we need to make sure we've got the polygon frame hotspots turned on. Click OK, we go to the 2D window, come back in and select our tool, and we can see our frame now has some polygon hotspots. And using these, we can create a more detailed frame. Now, I want you to pay attention. As I'm doing this, I'm not going to worry too much about the size. It's a little sluggish. This polygon frame takes a fair bit to develop, but that speed issue is actually generated by the fact that it's communicating with databases. So what that means is that every time I change something, it's opening and closing those databases that we stored those components in. So what I'm going to show you after I've been through this is a new feature that I've added in where we can change these to internal databases. So we don't have this speed issue at all. We can create any assembly out of this that we want, but this is basically what I'm after. So let's just go and have a look. You can see our other frame's the same. Just going to go into the 2D settings and open these panels up. There's a feature in here that locks those, so I've got to make sure that's not locked. See, fixed open, so unlock that. Click OK, so I can then completely close this element. Now I want this element to sit correctly within this frame. If we have a look at this in 3D, you can see that channel working. So to get these windows, these elements to sit correctly within the frame, I need to get my sizes right. So I'm just going to measure this size. What I might do is I just might set these values. We can tab in here and these are the actual coordinates of the values. So I'm going to make this 4 mil. Actually, I'll make it 5 mil so it's easy to calculate. Same with this one. So we can actually use coordinates to do this. It's a 50 mil frame width. I'm going to set these to set these to 5 mil too. Okay, there we've got our perfect channel. So we've got a 50 mil frame width and we've got 5 mil on either side. So that gives us a 40 mil internal dimension. So in order to move the sliding window so it sits within the frame, we need to go back into the settings. We first need to undefine these elements because it's this aspect that we want to change. So we first need to set that to undefined. That enables us to then adjust these elements. So we go into the openings. I'm going to set undefined for that as well, and undefined for our sash. Now we can go into our openings, hit define, and we can change the offset to frame. So at the moment it's set to internal. If we set it to center, that'll probably sort it for us. Gives us a 15 mil offset. Let's have a look. Now we actually want it to extend within that frame. So we need to adjust the width of this frame. Not the actual width, we need to adjust the stored width. So there's a separate parameter for that. If we're going to be able to have all these polygon frames, we need to be able to define the position that the window butts to. So we have this 5 mil here. So we want that window to come in perhaps not to the 5 mil, perhaps to 6 mil. So we go back in, we go to our frame component. This width here, we actually set to 6 mil. Click OK, and now you can see our window actually goes within the frame. Same on this side. So now when we look at it in 3D, you can see that that sash element is sitting within that frame channel. Okay, now what we want to do is we want to save this. So let's go back here, back to our components, and we want to use the frame profile. So this frame profile we're going to call aluminium 01. Apply our frame database and hit store. Now we're just going to do a general frame as well. So we can just go back to define, back to a rectangular frame. We don't want this 6 mil anymore. We want that to be a proper dimension. We'll just go 35. Actually, we'll make this our timber, so we'll make it a bit bigger. Let's make this an 80 mil by 35. And then we can come down and we can store that. Call this timber 01 and hit store. After a quick refresh, we can then go and select our aluminium. That's disappeared because the user interface has been pushed down. So if we just reduce this a little bit and expand that so we can see it again, and then expand this again, and we can click OK. So now that we can see that again, we can quite easily use this to just toggle between our timber frame and our aluminium frame. We'll leave that set on the aluminium frame for now. So if we just go back to all our windows, we can quite easily now apply any of these frames for either of these windows. We could select this window, we go to our frame element, select the database, and for this one we'll just use the timber frame. Click OK. On these two, we will use aluminium frames, and on this element here we'll use the timber frame. Now that we have all our elements using the defined frames, if we go and alter those definitions, then the frame itself will also alter. What I'm going to do to demonstrate that is I'm just going to pull back this front section of the profile and show you how it updates in every window. So I'll just choose any of the windows, doesn't really matter which one. Set this back to undefined. So this is my aluminium frame. These are the nodes in here. I can go and change those nodes if I want to, or I can just go to the 2D. I prefer to do things in 2D, as I'm sure most of you do. So I'm just going to grab this frame element and I'm actually going to pull it back. I won't pull it all the way back. We'll just make it a little shorter on this side. Go back into the settings. Now all we have to do to overwrite that aluminium element is to hit store. Click OK. I'll just hit that store again just to make sure it did happen. Click OK. Now if we go into 3D, we need to refresh these elements. In order to refresh, we need to run the parameter script. You can do that one of two ways. You can go into your GDL menu, which I actually haven't got set up here in AutoCAD 21. Anyway, you can go into the GDL menu and you can do a run parameter script on all place elements. However, that will run a parameter script on every single object element in your project. So sometimes you just want to do a few. In this one, we just want to do our aluminium windows. So if we just select these, go into the settings and then click OK, that refreshes it. And when we come down here, we can see that extrusion is altered. What this means is that you can now control framing components and any other component of an operable element on a project level quite easily through this database function. In the infinite openings tool, which is by far our most complex tool, we have quite a number of components that we can define here. So we have obviously the shape, frames, mullions, profiles. We can also change the profile of the mullion as we did the frame. We have a subframe element. In the overall shape, we can set up any shaped opening element. So you could do a star, or as you may have seen in one of the earlier videos, you could do a bird even. That overall shape can then be stored so that you can use that in multiple places and then alter it globally as well. So back to the list, we have subframes, we have the panel arrangement. That refers to the arrangement of mullions and transoms. If I just undefine that, go back in, we only have a single pane here because that's the window we were after. However, if I do a certain number of panels and then I turn on and off certain sections of mullion and transom, let me just turn this global function off first. And that could become our stored panel arrangement. Now, as I briefly mentioned before, all this communication with external databases can slow things down. Not a great deal, but there is a slight lag, maybe 1 or 2 seconds, once you sort of start to develop quite a lot of data. So I've created a solution that eliminates this altogether. And that's where this internal aspect comes in. Now, if we want to get these elements into our internal catalog, we first need to open up the internal catalogs library and import those elements. Okay, let's get out of this. Just click OK. The object we want to open is within this library. We just go to our object tool and we go locate our library. Infinite openings, macros, and here's our internal data object. Now, to actually have this data get into this object, we can't just simply do it in this interface here. It would be nice if we could just simply click import here and it would come in, but that's only going to place that data in this one instance of this element. We want this data to be in the entire library so that every element can read it. So to do that, we need to click OK. We don't have to place this element. We can just open it by searching for it, but you might find it easy to place, although I haven't assigned any settings to it yet, so it's going to be difficult to select. So if I do a Control-Shift open now, and you can see I've got my internal data open. I go into the interface, go to preview, and I just select all my internal catalogs. These are the internal catalogs that I've been using. So all I have to do now is import. So I import my assembly, shape. I didn't do a curtain wall, but I'll just click on all these anyway and just import all this data. It imports quite quickly. Click OK. Now when I come back into the settings of my elements, we're in this assembly. In the external data assembly, we have all these options, whereas in the previous internal data, we only had these 2 options. Now, if we click on internal data, we still don't have the options. Why? Because I forgot to save the object. Click OK, go back into this object and hit save. That's right, this element was actually created in ArchiCAD 19 and I still want to use it in ArchiCAD 19. So I'm going to go do this in an ArchiCAD 19 file. So I'm just going to hit cancel and I'm going to close that. So I'm going to go into my ArchiCAD 19. I'm going to find that object, internal data, open up the interface, and I'm going to import all my data. Click OK. Now obviously I need to save this. So I'm going to hit save. If you want to check if that data came through, just go back to the parameters, find one of the components that you know should have updated and have a look. There we go, sliding and ordinary in there. So we know the data's come through. Let's make sure I save that, close that element, come back to ArchiCAD 21. Obviously I need to reload my library now. Okay, now when I go back into this element and I have my internal database, I now have access to those components. I can now set all of these elements to internal and I can still apply all those same settings that I had before. So if I want to set up an internal assembly, now when I apply any of the components that I set up before, such as these sliding elements, then I can be confident there'll be absolutely no delays in the operation of this tool, no matter how complex it gets or no matter how many elements I place within a project. This will enable an absolutely unprecedented level of quality control and project management over individual elements. We have the same function in our basins tool, and we'll be putting this function into every single one of our tools. So you'll be able to control individual components of a project on a project scale. You'll also be able to set up the databases so that you can use different databases for different projects. You'll be able to have a company-specific database that controls your documentation standards. As you see down here, there is a 2D lines and fills option for these components as well. So you can define your company standards for 2D representation and make sure that those are adhered to. All these elements can be scheduled, so through a schedule, you can quickly check to see what elements are using what component. Also, as the data is in an XML format, you will be able to create a connection to that data via a simple spreadsheet or even using other BIM platforms that will aid in project management. Hope you've enjoyed watching this video, and I hope you look forward to using this functionality, which I'm sure is going to save you all a great deal of time, going to give you a whole new level of management and control, and obviously eliminate errors. Thanks for watching. Ta.